Hi guys, this is my Alcatraz prison. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about what everything is here, and hopefully by the end of this you should be able to have a good idea if you wanted to kind of replicate your own kind of replica. Now, I've seen other people that have created Alcatraz prisons, or things they've called Alcatraz prisons, and obviously Alcatraz is a real prison. You can go there. I have been there this summer. And I kind of, as I've played this game so much, when I went there I was just looking around thinking, oh, that's where the kitchen is, oh, that's a clever place. And I've kind of modified this because it's quite difficult to replicate the actual Alcatraz. But it's the same shape, but there are some differences and some additional things that aren't where they should be. The cell blocks are almost perfectly replicated. However, I have added these little shower blocks because in the actual Alcatraz prison, the shower blocks are off to the side, I think, like over in this region or somewhere like that. But they aren't in the actual cells. I've added lots of small little showers purely because it makes your prison work. Otherwise, if you have one prison shower block, I don't know, it just didn't seem fitting. However, the space that I've used for the showers is actually a staircase in the actual prison. I will, in the description, if you want to see a link to the kind of planning, or the blueprints, I suppose, for Alcatraz. They all show you exactly what everything's like. In the corners of these rows of cells, there were staircases which went up to the second and third floors. Obviously, prison architect is a kind of flat top-down one-floor system, and I don't believe they're adding any extra floors, and I hope they don't, because I don't like the idea of that. It means you're not constantly looking at everything, whereas at the moment you're kind of looking at everything that's going on, as assuming you have fog of war off. But anyway, I'll just show you a couple of the different zones, and I will use the planning just to kind of show you exactly what I mean, so you can see a bit better. So over on the right hand side, this whole region over here is the admin in the actual Alcatraz. Now, I've copied that mostly, however I've changed some of the rooms around. The warden does have his big office like he does in the actual Alcatraz, and in front of that I've put all the other kind of smaller offices, except the psychologist's office, which I put down at the bottom. Now, I've kind of split this, so there's half of this that in the deployment is not allowed for prisoners. So that's got the kennels, armories, offices that the prisoners aren't going to need to access. So this block should be constantly closed, and that door will close in a second. Hopefully. There you go. Now this one, I've got the door permanently open just because prisoners are coming in and out of here so often, it's kind of pointless to have that open. Plus, if I did do a lockdown, it would shut that manually anyway, which is why I like having lots of jail doors everywhere. Now, I've got, in this empty kind of bit, I've got a bit of a mess of things, because there's so many things I needed to fit in, yet I had such a small amount of space. I could have, I suppose, extended this outwards, but I really wanted to keep the proportions, so I tried to like ratio the edges and make it all sized right. But I've got some security in a staff room down here. I've got visitation over here. Now, this is the region where it was, and I may change this in a kind of as I play. However, the actual visitation is the prisoners will sit on a chair this side of a wall with a glass window and a telephone system across it, and the family or whoever are visiting will sit the other side. So realistically, these tables should be laid out, I suppose, a bit like that or that. However, I haven't really done that yet. I could, I suppose, put them down here, and it wouldn't be quite as space efficient because you'd only be able to get a couple, probably not as many. 1, 2, 3. You'd be able to get 3 and maybe another one if you change the walls a bit. But I've just changed it so the visitation's in the same place but looked a slightly bit different. But that's the kind of theme with this thing, is I tried to make it from a distance. You can go, oh yeah, that looks exactly the same as the top-down map, which I'll, as I said, is in the description. I may have a pop-up of it at some point, or at the start, or throughout the video or something. But the offices are kind of the same shape, roughly the same layout, but some of the smaller offices are just in different places just to make it work. Now at the bottom here I've got the psychologist's office, which obviously prisoners need to go for behavioural therapy here, and he's teaching it, but apparently no one's there. That's strange. Apparently someone is in behavioural therapy, yet is also doing parole. Strange. And I've got the infirmary over here, and again the infirmary's not necessarily in the right place. There is a kind of different building. That's the one thing, is that I've not built the whole of Alcatraz Island. I've instead built the Alcatraz prison block. The island would be huge. This is as small as I could get the actual prison block. But there is like a huge building, roughly the same size as this, just for industries. So instead of the workshop, whereas in Prison Architect, you can get away with a workshop this big, and that's perfectly fine. And the same with laundry and the shops and common room and stuff. That's another thing, is that I've added things that weren't actually in the prison. Common room, there was not in Alcatraz. It's a supermax. It's not got a common room. The prisoners could request things to be sent to their cells, and they would then use that in their cell. But they wouldn't go to a common room and play pool or anything, or read books there. They'd have people bring books around. The library is in the correct place, and the cells are also all in the same place. Now I've got, well, from the top, this is the A block up here, then there's B, C, and at the bottom this little one is D block. Now this is where I can't remember exactly what the cells are called, but they're basically like, it's a cross between kind of protective custody and intensive, kind of, not intensive care, but if a prisoner was ill or something like that, or needed more intensive psychological care, they would be sent to these cells, which are actually bigger. So these cells are 3x4 rather than 2x3. And over here I've kind of followed the same design for the solitary cells. Now I can show a picture I took when I was in Alcatraz of the solitary cells, and they do have a locked blackout door on the front with a very, very small mesh grid, and then they have a cell bar door on the front. So I've kind of mimicked that. They've got like an inner door and an outer door with a little space in the middle, and they've also got the solitary obviously at the back there. Now I've got this block as maximum security, which is because my prison has some problems recently, and I've only accepted normal risk prisoners, but we have quite a lot of high risk, so I've tried to send as many of them as possible down here, but I just don't have enough cells here at the moment. There's not much I can do about that without ruining all the format, so unless I changed one of these somehow into a purely maximum to try and separate them, I don't know whether it would work. So again, I've got more showers over here that are a bit unrealistic or untrue. But I will just zoom in on the cell blocks. So I've done this in a kind of unsymmetrical way, and the doors all open in the same direction, which I think is true. And the cell bed, or the bed in the cell block, sorry, in the actual cell, has the head of the bed by the door, or by the wall next to the door. The wall is actually not a wall, it's the whole of the front of the cell in the real Alcatraz, as I'll show you another picture of that now, is all bars, but then half of that bar is door, and then the toilet is next to the bed. Now there are some shelves, but you can't have shelves in Prison Architect, and there's also a very small fold out seat and table, but I haven't included those because it just wouldn't look right. If I had to add a chair, you'd just have to be having a chair in the cell, and it just looked a bit odd having an office chair because it's just literally a piece of metal that folded down. So that's the individual cells, and they do have this kind of symmetrical pattern rather than a continuous left-hand door. They've got kind of alternating 2 beds next to each other, and 2 beds next to each other, 2 beds next to each other. They also don't have lights in them, but I always do customized lighting in my prisons because I hate the generic 4x4 grid it just adds, which I don't like. Now another thing I've got, which you can see over here, is this thing going down all the way down the middle, and I've tried to use this for all the plumbing. However, I have put electricity down there, but because of the walls, the electricity can't get through, so I had to actually add in extra electricity cables all the way down in between the cell block. But I have got all the water plumbing going straight down here. Now, if any of you have seen the film Escape from Alcatraz, which is the famous escape of 3 prisoners, almost 4, but only 3 actually got out, you can see that the way they got out is through this central utility corridor. And now if you go to the prison, you can see between the cells, they don't kind of back onto each other. There's a utility corridor that has lots of pipe work and plumbing and air ventilation and stuff like that. Basically so they could have all the mechanical stuff out of the way of prisoners, rather than having it going through the actual prison. And this is how the prisoners got out. They managed to dig their way through this wall, through a kind of breathing grill, and they got out, and they then climbed up through the piping. Out the roof is what they believe happened. Now this is true. The film is based on a true story. I have a picture, which I will show now, of the very hole that was dug out through this grill, and these prisoners disappeared. And interestingly, I find very interesting, a lot of my friends get bored of this story, but the prisoners never officially escaped, and that is because no one ever found them. And to me, that sounds like poo. Because if you don't find someone who escapes, what do you think happened to them? They probably could have died, but most likely they probably got out. And the problem with Alcatraz is that it's about a mile and a bit to the next bit of land. So people say, well, no, of course they couldn't have swam a mile through cold seawater and found their way out and escaped. But on the other hand, what happens if a boat passed by and just happened to pick them up that might have been coordinated? Things like that, I think, are just possibilities, so that's my opinion anyway. But that's the interesting escape. So I've kind of factored in all these things into trying to make this prison as realistic as possible. Now another thing I've done is having these little paths. I've tried to like visually make the prison look kind of like it. Now in the prison it's a kind of concrete floor, and it has, I think, white or yellow lines in front of the cells, but I instead just had one line down in between, and I just tried to make it so people would walk along that, like this guy's following it. It just makes it kind of look a bit more realistic, although for some reason not everyone seems to follow it. I did, however, try and make it so the ceramic floor, which is this bit around the outside, which has a normal walk speed, is one part of it. But then I had the mosaic floor, which is walk speed fast. So the AI should make them walk down this fast bit, but sometimes they don't seem to do it. Usually prisoners do, but the staff don't. It's a bit weird. So that's the cell box. Again, it's all very, very, very similar over here. I'll try and kind of show you pictures to explain things along the way. Now, in the corner of the Alcatraz prison, there is a really tiny door which goes out into the Recreational Yard, and I've kind of recreated that here, and I've got the grass area at the end, which is what you can find, and I have added something again that isn't there because it's kind of necessary to make Prison Architect work, which is phone booths, and I've got those all linked up to a monitoring phone tap over here, tidied the wires and made it all look nice. But again, that isn't actually in isn't in Alcatraz prison. I've also added this kind of design, which I'll show you a picture of the kind of design of Alcatraz, and in the corner there's this kind of interesting, this kind of shape of steps. So this bit is much, much higher than down here, and they've got all these steps where people can sit or, I don't know, run up, I suppose. And I've also added lots of little weight benches over here, which I don't know if they're in the actual prison, because I haven't seen a picture of the Recreational Yard when it was in use. I've only seen pictures of it since it's been shut down. Now the canteen is another thing that's fairly accurate, and just got a door on the front, and it's got quite a big canteen here. You can look at the map and see this. Then there's lots of tables for all the prisoners, and at the back there's a kitchen, which again is fairly accurate. I don't know if the layout of the kitchen is exactly how it would be. I've just tried to fit as much in as possible whilst making it look fairly okay. And I have got prisoners assigned in here, which I think is actually what happened. I think some prisoners were able to work in the kitchen as well as in the workshop. However, they weren't attached to this block. They were completely separate buildings. But yeah, that's about everything. This prison does work quite well, and just to show you, it's about almost 10 hours of gameplay to try and get this functioning to where it is now. I've still got a few grants left to do, but everything seems to be alright. There's a few little minor problems like parole. I've only got one parole room, but I really can't, without ruining the realism of the prison, it's not going to be easy to change everything round, because I've got to have another 5x5 block. So unless I literally just add on extra buildings like up here or something, which is unrealistic, it's just not going to be able to change that. So I'm kind of just living with certain aspects of the game that aren't perfect, but it does function. I'll show you my prison grading. We've had 4 deaths, which is expected now. You've got traits like people that give away information. I forgot what they're called. Not sneaks, not spies. Snitches, that's the word. We've had no escapes though, which is what you'd want from Alcatraz. We've had no re-offended prisoners. We've had no executed prisoners because I haven't done execution. We get quite a lot of profit. Now that is a lot lower than it usually is, because I think we've been having some trouble, because I've just recently finished the food. I can't remember what it's called. This Inmate Nutrition, and I accidentally left it serving single low quality, low variety meals for about 3 or 4 days. Wondered why all my prisoners were rioting a bit. They weren't rioting, they were just getting very angry and fighting lots. And I then realised, oh, I need to change them back, and yeah. So I had a bit of a problem, and that was only shortly completed, so I'm still recovering from that. So if I go to finance, it's only been 3 days since that incident. So when that gets up to 20 days or whatever, which shouldn't take too long, it will get me a lot more money, because you get a lot of money from just not having incidents. But yeah, that's this prison. If you've got any questions or want to know any tips or advice, or you've got problems with Prison Architect, do let me know. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you in another video. Goodbye.